Magic has no shortage of behemoths. There's something inherently fun about playing giant monsters with powerful abilities. Many of the most iconic cards in the game are massive, powerful creatures. Monstrous beings such as Emrakul, Progenitus, Grizzlebrand, and this guy. Ikoria, the latest Magic set, is self-labeled as the Lair of Behemoths, so everyone was expecting a plane with giant monstrous beings. Now that we have the full spoiler and the digital release of the set, we can see it in its full, bizarre form. It's a weird set, and many people commented that the set had less behemoths than they were expecting. But is there actually a shortage of beastly bruisers, or does it just seem smaller because of our expectations going in? Well, let me tell you, I figured it out, and I can definitively tell you whether or not Ikoria is the true Lair of Behemoths. First, we need to establish a baseline of just what a behemoth is. Luckily, there are in fact 26 creatures that bear the title of behemoth throughout the collective history of Magic, and we're going to use these to create our criteria. What do all of these creatures have in common? Well, it's not creature type, and it's not color. There's, not really. Okay, the only thing they really have in common is power and toughness. If you take the average power and toughness of all of these creatures, you get a 4/4. Now, I could have just looked at how many creatures have power or toughness 4 or greater in each set and been done with it. But that would have left out a few behemoths. And I am all about inclusivity. As long as there are creatures literally named Behemoth, they should be counted. So while Beacon Behemoth and Cliff Runner Behemoth are not as thick as their counterparts, their extra punch makes up for it. And War Behemoth, while weaker than the others, has some junk in the trunk that makes it unique but still part of the family. So what we're going to be looking for is creatures with power and toughness 4 or greater, creatures with toughness 3 as long as their power is 5 or greater, and creatures with power 3 as long as their toughness is 6 or greater. This way our searchers will be able to find each of the behemoths, with the exception of one. Fungal Behemoth falls outside of these power and toughness parameters because of its varying power and toughness, which are represented as ***. I could not specifically accommodate for it and other creatures like it, but fair is fair, I still added it towards Planar Chaos's total. Now, there are some other potentially arbitrary restrictions I established in counting and eliminating some cards from the totals. Theros Beyond Death had additional creatures that could be found only in theme boosters or collector's packs, and Eldraine had cards exclusive to Brawl decks and collector boosters. I chose not to count these as they're not a part of the official set total and cannot be found within regular boosters. Creatures that depict groups, whether some form of cavalry, marauders, cultists, or a pack of animals, were not counted. Additionally, people riding animals were not counted, as someone does not become a behemoth just because they can ride a horse. Vehicles were also removed. When it comes to transform cards, I went back and forth until ultimately deciding to count the transformed versions, under the logic that, on Innistrad, the transformed cards are part of an inevitability within the universe of the plane. That being said, I only counted meld cards as the transformed wholes, and did not include the cards used to make the meld. Walls were also excluded. If you disagree and want to include this as a behemoth, I respect both yours and Erica Eiffel's opinion, but I'm not counting them. With my criteria finally confirmed, I then began going through set by set, tallying all of the creatures that fell within the guidelines. While taking notes, I decided not to count supplemental sets such as core sets or Modern Horizons, as these don't necessarily stick to one plane. The same goes for Battlebond and Conspiracy. Though those two do take place on a primary plane, they also include reprints that clearly depict creatures from outside these planes. The only supplemental sets I felt I could include were the 3 Portal series, but other than putting up impressively low results, they didn't really influence the overall stats. After getting my final tally, I ran into one final problem in terms of fairness. If we ranked the sets simply by the number of behemoths they contained, there would be a very obviously unfair advantage to whichever sets had the most cards. Sets that contained only 150 cards would be completely outclassed by those twice their size. So additionally, I calculated each set's percentage of behemoths, to give the most fair estimate of the true Lair of Behemoths. Alright, with all that nonsense out of the way, we have our results. So how did Ikoria perform? Well, Ikoria is coming in with a total of 33 behemoths. For a reference, at the very bottom of the count, we have a 3-way tie between Antiquities, Alliances, and Exodus, with a total count of 4 behemoths. Antiquities and Alliances don't especially surprise me given how old these sets are, but Exodus is notable to be clustered with these two. You would think that the progress of the game would have given it more big creatures, and to be honest, it did. It does have more creatures that fall within the power and toughness requirements, but they have been disqualified due to them being groups of animals. Again, not a behemoth. So yeah, Ikoria has firmly crushed these sets. Does that secure its position at the top? Well, it's very close, but it only makes third place in total behemoth count. At second place is the twisted fairy tale land of Shadowmoor. Shadowmoor having a behemoth count of 37. I was not expecting it to place this high, but when you consider how many giants and avatars there are in the set, it makes a lot of sense. It also helps that it is a large set. Before I tell you what the set with the highest count of behemoths is, I want you to take a second and think about what your guess is. When you think tons of big creatures, what is the set that comes to mind? Well, be prepared to be shocked. With a total count of 43 behemoths, Magic's 7th set ever has the highest total. It's Legends, which has so many giant creatures because of its many legends. Now, you may be calling into question my decision to count people as behemoths. Fair. But would you not describe this man as a behemoth? Also, look at how big some of these people are. This guy is towering above those birds. He's making those trees look like weeds. And this woman is so big, she makes the gods of Theros look tiny. More seriously, this was early in the life of Magic, and these are the first gold cards ever, and first legendaries. Wizards was still figuring out how to properly balance these cards, and what the color theory behind multicolored cards was. And part of the reward at the time for having 2 or 3 different colors was that you got big, strong creatures. But it's not like any of that mattered anyways. That's only for the behemoth count. As I said earlier, the only fair way to analyze these sets is by looking at the percentage of behemoths in proportion to how large the set is. In this regard, Ikoria is an impressive 12% behemoth. The worst being Alliances with just above 2%. But while last time Ikoria ranked 3rd, it has now slipped quite a few places, specifically to 13th place. Here are the sets above it. I will say I was surprised that counting Fungal Behemoth ended up mattering in the end. Without it, Planar Chaos would not have secured the number 2 spot. But who is the true victor? Claiming the number 1 spot with almost 16% behemoths is your true Lair of Behemoths. The second set in Alara block, Conflux, is the most densely packed with high power and toughness creatures. And if I had to award the title of the Behemoth plane to any plane, I would have to give it to Alara. Each of Alara's sets ranked above Ikoria, with them taking 1st, 3rd, and 10th positions in the total percentages. Alara and each of its shards have some truly terrifyingly powerful creatures. In the same logic as the original Elder Dragons, the incredibly restrictive cost brought incredibly powerful rewards. Flavor-wise, the severing of the plane into shards may have played into the growth of creatures into such colossal sizes, but that's speculation for a different day. What about Ikoria? Well, honestly, I would say it delivers on the title of Lair of Behemoths. Sure, it's not at the very top of all sets, but it's pretty high on the list when you consider that we're looking at a total of 87 sets. And if we return to the plane again, we may see it rank higher next time. As for the set itself, aside from one mechanic that may prove to be really broken, I think the set and the plane are really cool, and I think it's one of the most interesting plane designs we've seen in a while. So I hope you're enjoying the set and staying safe. Thank you for watching my video where I overanalyzed power and toughness of creatures in a card game, and I hope to see you in the next one.